Carolina, Mr. Budd.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Chairman Clayton. Thank you again for being here. So you testified about some of the administrative actions the SEC has undertaken to improve capital formation. And I want to highlight specifically the SEC's decision to expand confidential IPO registration in the submission process to all issuers, large and small. So has the initial Jobs Act provision proven popular to emerging growth companies? And what have you seen since the July finalization of the SEC decision in terms of large issuers taking advantage of the SEC decision, expanding the confidential registration option?
The initial data is positive. People, not just people using it, but people saying, thank you, we intend to use it. And both from an IPO perspective, but also from the perspective of the follow-on offerings that occur in the first year. So sure. I think the response is positive, and we're also monitoring on the investor protection side. If there is any adverse views, I'd like to hear them. We haven't heard any.
So of the positive results that you've observed or seen and heard, why do you think they've been successful, or why do you think they have been positive, and have they achieved that success without compromising fundamental investor protections and transparency?
Yeah, I think this one was pretty straightforward. This made it easier, but there was no change in the disclosure, and I think investors still have plenty of time with the disclosure to make an investment decision. I haven't heard anybody say they don't have enough time.
Sure. So do you believe that the collaborative process represented by confidential registrations has meaningfully reduced the risk associated with an IPO?
I think it's reduced the risks to the company of the process, and I like the word you used. I think when companies go through the registration process and transform from a private company to a public company, they emerge as better companies.
Sure.
I think the staff review process and the accounting review
sure.
I think it makes them better companies.
Makes sense. So Chairman Clayton, I'd also like to talk about finders. Take example, if two Main Street businesses come together and one would like to raise money and they offer the other a finder's fee and that transaction works out and they actually raise capital, the SEC has held for about 16 years that this transaction required that a business needs to register as a broker-dealer. That puts them in the same category as Merrill Lynch or JP Morgan, like a securities trader. It's an unworkable strategy in my view. So is it your view that the SEC could undertake some activity towards clarifying the significant regulatory uncertainty that exists right now with regard to finders? And what would that look like in your world? So
look, this is a line drawing question, and I know that this committee has explored this issue in the terms of an M&A finder. I think the question you ask is, should we look at that if somebody's doing this on an ad hoc basis, not as a business, not in connection with a broad capital raising or a capital raising, but just...
Maybe you could answer it for both.
Yeah.
Ad hoc as well.
Yeah. I fundamentally agree that if someone is not in the business of doing this type of activity, and it's clear that they're not, and you have kind of big guys involved or sophisticated people, sure. They don't seem like a broker-dealer to me, okay? But I don't want to go too far down the slippery slope, because when you start going out to 5 or 6 people and say, hey, how about investing in this? And by the way, I'm taking 7%.
Sure.
And, then you sound a lot like a broker to me.
Do you think that there'll be some efforts from the SEC to clarify that?
I think if somebody is worried in the situation, in the hypothetical you described, if somebody is worried that we're going to find them a broker-dealer, we probably need to address that.
Certainly. I want to raise the issue of Financial Accounting Standards Board, or the FASB Current Expected Credit Loss Standard. Mr. Zeldin from New York and I are working on a letter now, but virtually every bank in my state views that standard as unworkable. It's onerous and it's hurtful to the availability of credit. Is there a possibility that the SEC will study this rule at more length before going ahead with its implementation?
I can't make that promise today. I understand these issues. I think most of it is a bank capital issue and whether this is going to require them to hold more capital as a result of an accounting change. I know Many of these banks are in dialogue with their bank regulators about this. There is a pro-cyclicality to it, but I'll look at it.
Thank you.
Time of the gentleman has expired. The chair